I'd like to say we had an executive session at 3 o'clock and there's nothing to report out. So now we will start with the regular meeting here at 4:30. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's do a roll call.
Director Diamond.
Here.
Director Hetherington. Here. Director Odette. Here. Director Rolfe. Here. Director Stevens.
Here. Are there any special orders of business? Board President reserves the right to modify the agenda to run this thing. I haven't heard anything to change the order. And now, speak your piece. Pay attention. Be aware and attend to the world and the people around you. Listen, focus on others in order to better understand their points of view. Be inclusive. Welcome all groups of citizens working for the better good of the community. Don't gossip and don't accept when others choose to do so. Show respect. Honor the people and their opinions, other people and their opinions, especially in the midst of any disagreement. Be agreeable. Look for opportunities to agree. Don't contradict just to do so. Apologize, be sincere, and repair damaged relationships. Give constructive criticism when disagreeing, stick to the issues, and don't make a personal attack. Take responsibility. Don't shift responsibility and blame onto others. Share disagreements publicly. Now is the time for public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. 3-minute limitations, Mr. Daniel. Is there any public comment?
I got one. You're not going first. Go ahead. I hate being first, but I'll be first. I live in Truckee, and I am a pilot here at the airport. I actually thought it was your last meeting today, so I wanted to come thank you for the last 8 years of everything you've done for the airport. You've always made the time to come by my office, talk to me about things, reach out, and you've showed a lot of care and a lot of compassion. So thank you for everything you've done the last 8 years.
Thank you.
That's what I was going to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other public comment? Okay. Consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull any items from the consent agenda? Yes.
I'd like to pull number 5.
Any other items? Can we have a motion on items 1 through 4?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Items number 1 through 4 have been pulled. Teresa, would you like to comment on number 5?
It's actually a question. If we approve that and go, I know it's just a wage scale, but I want to know, does that automatically mean that we're implementing that, the increase?
Lauren, do you want to talk to this? As far as my understanding is the wage scale reflects what the board has already reviewed and approved previously from our compensation study. And so CalPERS needs to have this board approved ranges to be put in the system.
Yes. It's our new wage scale, which was approved with the salary recommendations with the class and comp study in September.
So as far as it affects individuals, nothing transpires at this point, and just part of our normal review process at the beginning of the year.
We accepted it before and now we approve it, is that? Okay, good. Then, I'm good.
Would you like to make a motion to approve item number 5?
After, if anyone has any public comment, or,
Well, is there any public item on, comment on item number 5? Any board comment?
I'll make a motion, we approve number 5.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Now we're moving to action items. And number 6, unfunded pension liability additional payment. And the payment in question is we have, over the last 3 years, paid down, made additional discretionary payment to CalPERS of $500,000. And the discussion at the last meeting was that what has happened to the net pension liability. In 2022, it was $3.05 million. In 2023, it was $2.78 million, or a reduction of $270,000. And if we make this payment, the plan will be 83% funded on June 30, 24. And if we don't make it, it's only 72% funded. And the payment to CalPERS on the unfunded pension liability, we're charged 6.8% versus approximately 5% we earn on the cash that we have in our pocket. And we discussed, should we make this payment or not? Has it made an impact? It's not as much as I would like, but I do believe we have made an impact, and I personally am in favor of making the $500,000 payment. That is my presentation on this. Do we have any comments from the board? Do we have any comment?
I think that,
Mike, you got it? I'm sorry.
yeah, are we doing questions or comments?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. There are some other big expenses that are coming in this budget, and I would like to defer it a year. I'm not comfortable making this payment this year. And when you said it dropped it to 83%, that was in 2024 versus a 72%, which then it says this is the approximate average funded ratio for miscellaneous classic plans. So we're in par with other groups, and so I would not be in favor of this.
Can I just clarify one thing? The payment that they're referring to here, the funding levels, was last year's payment. That's what got us to the 83
Okay,
versus 72 had we not done it.
right.
So not counting anything for what we would pay this year.
Any other, yes, ma'am.
Question, is this included in the budget, the proposed budget, the payment?
No, because this is for 2024.
Was it included in that budget?
I believe so.
No.
No?
She said yes, you said no.
I don't ever see it in the budget, and I wonder where the heck it is, and it happens when we approve it. And it's more a balance sheet
It's a
thing?
balance sheet item. That's why it's not not a budgeted item.
So it's not
It's
in
cash.
the budget. It's cash.
Okay.
But we do talk about it every year before we actually make the payment.
Which we're doing right now.
Yes, we are.
Why are you laughing at me? You only have 2 more meetings to put up like
I'm
that.
just enjoying you right now.
What if we didn't pay it this year? You recommend that we pay it. Is there a big penalty, or is it just,
The funding level wouldn't be as high.
that's basically what would happen. There's no detriment necessarily.
And it really all depends
Except-
on the valuation that comes from the overall pool. So it's kind of a host of things all added together.
Right,
But it does definitely help our funding percentages for sure.
okay.
And they charge us 6.8% on the unfunded number, which is a lot of money. And it used to be that the gap of what we get from our reserve funds is much smaller since we're getting about 5% on everything. It used to be we were getting 1.5 and being charged 6.8, which made no sense to me why we shouldn't do it. But Kelly's done an excellent job at raising the number. Any other comment from the board?
The only comment I've got is, do you know something we don't know? With regard to like the rest of this meeting that we would want to,
Well, we're doing the budget.
Right.
Again, we're looking at that, and the next thing on here is the apron A2 reconstruction, if we're gonna go that way, which is 3.3. We're still waiting to hear what the insurance will reimburse us on the hangars. And I just feel if we wait a year, and next year we could do 500, or we could do 750, or we could not do it at all. But I just am looking at the numbers, and I would feel more comfortable not doing it this year and revisiting it next year.
Just a reminder, this would be for 2024, not for the items that we're talking about for 2025.
Yeah, and also, it's a catch-up payment. Obviously, we're paying as we go, just like every other special district.
Yep.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Pardon me?
Your microphone's off.
Any comments from the board or from the public on this payment? Well, I disagree with Mary. I think we should make it, and I would like to make a motion. The board approves the additional discretion in payment to CalPERS in the amount of $500,000. That is my motion.
second,
Any discussion? Any public comment? I'd like a roll call vote on this since we have disagreement here.
Director Dinan,
yes.
Director Hetherington,
No,
Director Odette,
I'll abstain.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is a nice big item, apron A2 reconstruction. Item number 7.
Thank you for that. Rob Etnier, General Manager. I'll introduce this topic. We do also have our airport engineer here, Damon Brandley, to address questions the board might have or members of the public. The Apron A2 project has been on our airport layout plan, AIP program of pavement maintenance for a number of years now. It's highlighted on the screen here in red, the area we're talking about with the blue circle around it. We're talking about a complete reconstruction of this area right outside this main building as our primary area we park aircraft and service aircraft here at the Truckee Tahoe Airport. It's been on the schedule a number of years. It's reaching the end of its useful life and the end of its life according to our pavement management plan, and it's due to be repaid and replaced in our schedule this year. We are recommending that we move forward with it next year in 2025. There are some AIP and AIG FAA funds available to just about $1.4 million. The remainder of the balance would have to be funded by the airport district. That is what's outlined in this information paper here and what has been built in the budget as well. We are planning the project to be in the spring of 2025. In anticipation of this project, we have canceled the air show for 2025 in order to spend about a month's time of completely reconstructing the apron A2 in front of the terminal building and including hydronic heat outside the main doors at our north side of the airport here, where we traditionally have a large glacier every winter that we try to do a lot of ice management on. So it does have a component of the project that adds hydronic heat outside that door as well. The details of the cost of the project based on estimates from our airport engineer are included in here, along with the detail excerpts from our pavement management plan that we are following as well. So I'll stop with that introduction to see if there are questions from the board of directors.
Questions from Board of Directors?
Rob? How many questions?
No questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Well, what are we going to do?
More in terms of a comment, this is coming before the budget is being voted on. And I can support this, but there's something I would like taken off of the budget. So if I approve this, then it gets a little dicey in terms of, the other things on the budget.
Well, can you tell us which item you?
The fuel tank.
The fuel tank,
Yeah.
okay.
This is a big chunk of money. I think it needs to be done, for the various issues. But, there's 750 or there's 500 on the fuel tank, and I think that could be done next year. Again, there's not any major projects being planned for next year, and so I can support this, but I would like that caveat noted for when we go to vote on the budget.
All right, so noted.
The only thing I was going to say about this is when we look at the forecast, it's talking about increasingly heavy aircraft. And when we think of the fuel tank and when we think of the weight bearing of the, if we feel like we are adequately charging access for the heaviest class of aircraft that we're doing this for, I think there's no question that we need to do it.
My comments are, it definitely needs to be done. I wouldn't recommend doing it this year from a money perspective, but Rob has made it clear that we don't want to push off the air show another year and other reasons why we should do it in this budget cycle. My comment is, I think we should borrow the money to do it. And rather than pay 3.3 million in this budget that is upside down already, I know we're not on the budget, but that's the reason why I think we should finance it or we should push it off a year. But it definitely needs to be done.
Any other comments from the board?
I'd like to concur that these are the premium spots, and they should be charged accordingly, either on 65 MTOW or 75,000 MTOW. Right now, we break at 50K max takeoff weight. And if somebody wants to park here, they should either be buying fuel with the discount, or they should be paying extra for that, because we're going from a 9-inch section to an 18-inch section, is that right? Which is very much changing, and then the argument will be, well, and we have to do the other sides of the apron. Oh, do we have to take them to 18-inch? And are we going to get federal money? And in the past, we have gotten almost full payment for aprons, but we're down the list now. Is that correct, Dame? They're choosing to fund other items at other airports. But in the past, they have funded for aprons.
It's just,
You gotta,
Just in general, FAA is sort of short on money across the board for all airports. They're able to fund runways pretty much. They've been pushing off runway projects on other airports all the way through, and they're kind of giving each airport, okay, get your runway, get your high priorities. Right now, aprons are just way down the list, and they don't have the funding for it, and hopefully in the future they'll have additional funds for it. So, but that's where it is now, and that's why you're not getting it. It's not.
yeah. So,
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. It's a money thing.
and as the engineer, so you're seeing, they did the boring this summer.
Yes.
and found degradation of the subgrade.
It confirmed the strength of the subgrade that we got from the analysis in the pavement management plan. So actual testing versus the theoretical confirmed itself.
And so the type of aircraft, what's the MTOW that an 18-inch cross-section will support?
What it is, it'll definitely support anything that's coming in up at your 100,000 and stuff. Now, if you look at the PMMP now, for this apron out here, it shows, I think, 32,000 on dual. That's for 1,200 operations a year, which you don't have
Right.
that many. It's all a moving scale depending on how many of the actual aircraft show up.
Right.
But all the aprons have been under-designed and they're being overstressed all these years. So, you know, the 17 to 18 inches is what we're constructing it's for your fleet mix, which has up to 100,000 pound aircraft in it.
Okay, and that's dual wheel, is 32. So will the circles have to be made bigger for wingspan? You know, that, because will we be able to park less aircraft in? Because we're talking what? We're talking 5, 6, 7, and 8?
Well, it depends.
6, 7, 8, 9?
We'll plan on having the same size circles there, and we park aircraft according to when they come in, their size, and it varies every day.
I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, it's 2,000 feet that we're talking about. And is that, yes,
There's 8 circles that we're looking at.
yeah, there's existing like 5 circles in that range, or correct?
I think there's
8 circles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and I think I'd suggest we probably put them back the same time, the same layout. It depends on what your traffic is. I mean, if you've got 4 aircraft that are all 100-foot wingspan, they're not going to fit in all the existing circles.
And they might not even fit there anyway, because they
That's
probably
right.
couldn't turn around.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
The layout of that, I mean, that's just a schematic on the surface. You know, structurally, it's all constructed the same.
so it will accept 100,000 dual wheel, even though the runway's 75.
I believe so.
Yeah, 50 single wheel, 75 dual wheel. So by it being parked there for periods of time, the weight is what is partially degrading
Yes.
the subbase.
Yes.
So,
Slow moving and parked is your worst case
right.
load.
So in those circumstances, I would concur with an assessment of fees of parking, because we are incurring those costs to protect our infrastructure for particularly heavy aircraft.
I don't know whether this is a Damon question or a staff question. We assume some liability for aircraft that are parked out there. So if there is a failure, a structural failure, and there's damage to the aircraft, presumably our insurance covers it. But we've just seen what happens when we make a claim on the insurance. So the question I've got is, and this goes to what Teresa was asking, if we borrow the money and we think about the cost of the payback for that, my first question is, how much does this end up costing us at that point in time? And secondarily, if we don't do it and we do have some sort of a structural failure, how much would we anticipate that ending up costing us and so the other option that I would see would be, do we defer this, taking the chance that we don't have the structural failure or any insurance claims on this, in the hope that the FAA would become more generous about this in the next year or 2 years? And is this reasonable to think?
Thinking FAA is towards the next year or 2 is probably not there, because they're pushing any runway project that comes up out to at least 2028 for other airports. So I don't think it's realistic that, you wait a year or so that they're gonna have funding. They're really
Okay.
planning the next 3 or 4 years pretty solid, and then, after that, they don't know exactly, but they've already got their budgets filled for the next 3 years.
Okay. So I guess the question I would have is, I think there's 2 questions here for us. Are we comfortable waiting no matter what the circumstances. Do we want it done now? And if we want it done now, do we borrow the money for it or we pay cash for it? Is that where we're at?
I haven't heard from Kat yet, or Rick, but I wanted to make a comment on your finance. Like, what does it cost us over time? Well, if we take the money out of our investments to pay for it, which we would have to do, we lose the 5% that we're earning on that money. So if we can borrow at 5% or less, it's net zero.
Okay.
Where will we borrow it from?
So with the current budget that we propose as the next agenda item, we have this project in there as part of next year's budget, which would mean we take the money out of next year's money that we pull in from our revenue, from the various sources of revenue to pay for the project, essentially. So it wouldn't necessarily be losing out of a bank account. Right now, we have a recommended budget of a net income of plus $1 million, which includes this project.
But if we borrowed it, we could put the 3 mil into an investment account and earn some money. Arbitrage, that's your technical term.
And we know that if we were to borrow the money, we would get the money at less than 5%?
I have not done any investigation on borrowing in the current rates for this project.
That seems like a big variance.
Historically, we have.
Okay.
We have guaranteed revenue. We're like the perfect borrower.
What's the interest rate we're paying on the hangar loan?
3.5.
But that was from like 7 years ago or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can pull it up
Rates have
for you.
definitely
It's really
changed,
low.
yeah.
I'll look and see what it is.
And what about the infrastructure? I thought some of that was for airports. You're saying that doesn't count, or it's already committed elsewhere on runways and things?
No, it is. The infrastructure law has money dedicated specifically to airports, and every airport has what they're calling the AIG, Airport Infrastructure Grants, which, as you see up there, the total available AIG funding, the 1.175 million, that is the infrastructure money that Truckee has gotten. You're getting around 300,000 a year for 5 years, so that is 4 of the years worth of money saved up. So that money is going towards this.
Okay.
And this is also the money that if we don't use it, we begin losing it starting next year.
If you don't spend this on the apron and you don't find somewhere else to spend it, you'll have 300,000 of that will just expire and go away.
I was
Well-
curious on this, because you've got the three numbers, 295, 292, and 294. It adds up to 881. Where's the other 300,000 from? Or is that also using 24 money?
So that's, so you scroll down a little bit so I can see those numbers there.
Yeah, right there at the bottom.
Yeah, that's the money that's expiring that year. There's another set of money that would expire in 28 also. We just didn't include it on the.
Okay, that's where you're coming up with the 1175. So that's the 300, and then the AIP is the 249.
Correct.
So from the feds, they're giving us 1.4 million.
Over 4 years. Is that correct, or did we get it all at once?
You get it all at once. You saved it
Right.
up. They gave it to you in 22, 23, 24, and then 25 will be the full year.
27
got-
and 28.
369, 900,000 in our asset on the balance sheet?
No, it's FAA money. We don't have it. They've been holding it
Oh,
for,
got it,
for
got
our,
it.
for our
Okay.
future
It's
projects.
available for you for an eligible project.
Well, I believe that this is a project that we should do, and we should do it next year, and not lose the 300,000, 295. And in order to encourage you to be in favor of this idea of mine and potentially a motion, that I would be okay with the fuel farm issue, removing it from the budget in order to get this through. That's my comment.
I think it's really important that we get this done sooner than later. For lots of reasons, liability is a huge one, I believe. I personally am very averse to financing. I haven't financed anything in my life for many, many years. It makes me uncomfortable being in debt. Maybe that's naive, but we've got it built into the budget. And when I'm looking at the strategic plan and all the checks on 25, the things that we had agreed to do last year when we passed it, we're already taking off the GSE, we've taken off the GPUs, and now we're proposing the fuel farm. That's 3 big projects on 25 that we're turning our back on now. And if, as Rob says, it's already built into the budget, I don't know why we would finance it.
Would it be possible for us today to decide on whether to do it or not, and then to decide on how to finance it after we hear back from you about the cost of the money?
That's certainly possible, yes. I would not recommend that, though.
Why?
As we've presented our budget, I think we have adequate funds that are available next year to do this project and still be positive $1 million in our budget next year, instead of incurring the finance charges over 20 years to pay for the project.
Well, I can't support it unless we at least look into the financing.
I think the aspect of financing would be, what is money being loaned at right now? I mean, when the folks come through and want to make deals with us, I can proceed with this. I am curious, though, what Oppenheimer, you said all them, they came through. If we were to do a $3 million loan, what they would charge us. It would be an interesting point for us to learn about next month. And then, but to support this now, I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, Josh was just reminding me, we're not asking you to approve the project today. We still have to go out to bid. We're asking you to include it in the budget for next year.
Okay.
When we go out, so there's time to look at financing options, how we pay for it options. When we go out to bid for the actual construction project and get the bids back, that will be 2 to 3 months from now. I think we're talking about January, February timeframe. Yeah. So I think we have time to go and look at what funding mechanisms other than self-funding are available.
And I do remember we always tried to get these out in January because our window is short.
And with this, you're not waiting for FAA's grant necessarily when you get it. And the grant you are getting from FAA, the AIG money, is there. It's different than the AIP money and how available it is. Sometimes the AIP doesn't show up until August or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So
Yeah.
This works a little bit differently. The 249,000 is still in that, but we're applying for it early.
So
You can probably front it and then get that anyway as you're going along.
I can support it if we agree, and I win this election, that we will debate, discuss financing before we agree to move forward. That it is on the agenda and we talk about it and we get options and really, if we're going to borrow $3 million, we might as well go for 4 or 5 and do everything on the list, including the fuel farm, because it also needs to be done, just not necessarily in this cycle because of the tightness of the budget.
And then since you live and die the pavement management plan, are there other big ticket items coming at us?
The next big ticket item coming is the eastern 2,000 feet of 1129.
That's a runway, though.
That's a runway though, and you are scheduled with FAA for either 28 or 29 funding for that. So
And that's 4, 5, 6 million.
that's about 4 to 6 million total.
Yeah, okay.
But FAA is working towards that, which is another reason why I'm trying to get money from FAA for this later on. You're already on their list for a big project coming up.
For that one.
Yes.
So,
And the other thing being, in terms of staff looking at weight classes and ramp fees, that would be another thing that I would hope that you bring to us when this project comes to us. Is that?
A Agreed.
So I would like to leave this in the budget to do it next year. And it's very clear on this motion is they'd go out and get competitive bids and would present it to the board for contract award in February of '25 or March '25 with an estimated project date of May, June '25. And I don't know if this is a motion, but I would like before the next vote on this, we'd like to see, we royally would like to see financing options.
And the other question is, how long of a construction? This has got to be 2 to 3 months, because you have to hog out.
It's about a 8 to 10 week process, and that's something we'll look at. Right now, we've estimated and set it up to build it into 2 separate phases, so we don't wipe out the entire front yard all at one time. Build one half of it, then build the other half. I'm thinking we may actually bid it with some bid alternates of, give us a price to build it all in one shot. It'll be more inconvenience to the airport, but it may be a little bit cheaper. You may be able to save some money. And since it's not, a majority of it's your money this time, that's real dollars you could save with that. So,
That's a good idea.
yeah, we're planning to bid that so that there's some options so that you can weigh, what's the impact versus how much you could possibly save.
Great, thank you.
You had a comment?
Public comment.
Pardon me?
Just public comment.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item? We've certainly had plenty of board comments. No public comment. So I'm going to make a motion that we leave it in the budget and do it next year and ask staff to look at financing options for approval by the new board in February, March of 2025. That's my motion, to leave it in the budget.
And to look at fees associated with these improvements.
I accept that amendment.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. I guess we're now going to talk about the 2025 final budget, which may or may not be final, depending on what actions we take. So let's talk about the budget.
Good afternoon, Kelly Wu, Director of Finance. You've all received the third version of the budget. The only major change there are the things that we agreed on at the last meeting. Added the loader back in at the financing price of $84,000, $150,000 for the website update, and added $500,000 back into community benefit. Those were the big changes, and I will open it up to you for discussion.
Who wants to go first? You're all looking at me, okay. Yeah, I did. Well, I brought handouts, but I also asked Lauren to pull it up. Can you do that for me?
There.
Yeah, okay, so I took the numbers that Kelly gave us, and background, Mary and I met with Kelly and Rob the other day, and I asked Kelly to give us budget, well, maybe not budget numbers, but actual numbers of airside revenue and airside expenses exclusive of FAA money, and exclusive of tax dollars, and exclusive of insurance money, exclusive of any of those projects, just pure, we never do anything. And that's what these are, right, Kelly? You can agree with that without double checking the numbers, but that's what I asked you for.
Yes, that's what I sent you last night in the
Yeah,
chat.
so I manually put them in, so if there's a typo, apologies. So this is, she gave me 5 years of data, plus the budget, which are those first 5 columns, and then the 6th one is the budget. Do you have a pointer?
Yes.
And then I just projected these lines out, and so this is, let's see, it's Nevada County, Placer County, then add them together is the dark green line. The blue one, the light blue is airside revenue.
Can you use that pointer?
Oh, sure. Yeah, how do I use it? I don't know, is it? Nope, it's dead. But you guys can see this, yeah?
No, we can't.
So this one, Mike. Okay. Okay, got it. So first one down here is Nevada County revenue, actual. The orange one is Placer County,
Property tax revenue.
property tax revenue. The dark green line is the sum of those two. The bright blue line is airside revenue. Then the green one is operating expenses, and purple is the total revenue in taxes and airside layered up. And this is the 5-year, and I pushed it out 10, just to see what it would look like. Okay, you guys all tracking with me? Okay, next one. So this is exactly the same thing, but with the 3-year average. The lines don't look vastly different, but the air side is flatter than the total. And do you understand the difference here? That's how trend lines work. This is 3 years of data pushing forward. So the average is shorter. Or that way, yeah. So it's the same stuff, and you guys can digest this later, but notice they're slightly different. Then next one. This one is only airside revenue versus airside expenses, 5 years. Pretty consistent. Those lines are almost parallel. I didn't do the percentages like Kelly did.
The gap between airside
Revenue and expenses. Yeah, and I can't do the math that fast, but it looks like it's about 3 to 5 million in any given year. Okay, next one. This one is just the last 2 years plus this budget. Totally different number. I should say it's the same numbers, it's just a different projection. And I wanted us to have this so we can think about it. And I also wanted to put it out to staff and say, for me personally and only me, I would hope that over the years, the goal is to close the gap with the budget by either increasing revenue or decreasing expenses. Just somehow work every year to close that gap a little bit. And I know we have the tax dollars to do that, but what else could we do in this community if we didn't have to do that? Or pay down a loan that we had taken out for something, or, you know.
It's a $4 million gap, roughly, every year.
3 to 5, depending on the year, yeah, but the average. It's, so my personal feeling, and this is just my philosophy, obviously, is that it should be balanced as it possibly can be on air side, so that we then have tax dollars left over to do things like FAA is not giving us any money, let's go do an apron. Or let's pay off the loan on the hangar so they're now making money. Or let's, you know, add all the things that we want to add. Let's get a tower that's not temporary. Let's do stuff. Let's give back to the community. And this isn't the meeting to talk about what we're going to do with the money. Although it was a question Mary pinned me to the wall on the other day. You know, but it's give back, and it's, we would have more options if we had more left over, is the bottom line. This is what I was asking for, and it's fantastic. That all being said, while I want the gap closed, it gives me a lot of comfort in that it's not runaway expenses. Mm-hmm. It's relatively even, so I'm not going to lose my mind over we're going to go broke. Everything seems to be keeping pace with each other. Make sense?
It does. Go back one slide, please. One more. This is the one,
3 years.
3 years, let's see, what am I trying to get at? It is linear, but I mean, it's been a delta of about 3 million until this budget where it's 5 million.
Yeah, I meant,
7 million, and I'm trying to understand what that difference is.
I'm going to be done with this in a second, unless you guys have
Okay,
any
finish.
questions for me.
Okay, on
I
this.
just wanted to give the board
Okay,
the groundwork, where I'm coming from these last couple budget meetings on, you know, what does this really look like? What's it going to look like? Are these lines going to cross over and we're going to go broke? It doesn't look like it unless the 2-year trend is the beginning of the future, which is where Mary's going to transition to when I'm done. So I want to make sure you guys get this and see if anybody had any questions on this before we move on. But I wanted to see the actual, just the airside, forget the FAA, forget the insurance, forget the hangars, forget any of that stuff. Just people, landing, snow removal, basics. That's it. I mean, anyone else have any questions? Okay.
I thought this was great. I mean, and for me, being the data queen, thank you for doing this into the Excel, and thank you, Kelly,
Yeah.
for responding yesterday.
Totally.
And getting this, because it does help, and it's like, you look at 20, 21, 22, those were COVID years, and then there's a smoke year, and there's a, 1129 reconstruction year, and how those play in. I was thinking that in terms of, that, Jeff, that great diagram you put together, that was in terms of growth, and growth in operations. To have this, actually, I'd like to see it over a longer period of time with those type of markers at the bottom. I think it could be very interesting, because it would also maybe affect how these lines fall, these trend lines.
Yeah, how much time you choose always affects it, and I think the longer the better. But it's also, the 2 years, like, let's look at this, because there's a significant jump in this year versus last year, and I want it to just be a blip.
Talk about that.
And I would, again, my personal preference is to task staff to close the gap as much as possible.
As much as possible.
As much as
I mean,
possible.
but I do think there's always going to need to be some of that money flow over onto the air side, and
Totally
that's
agree.
the purpose. But it's being aware of those two buckets and being, and acknowledging there's 3 million, there's 5 million, maybe years where there's 6 or 7 million, but to be clear what that differentiation is. This is very helpful. I'd like to see it over a longer timeline.
Well, I don't work here.
This is all you've had.
So a question I've got, and I don't even know who the question's for, if it's you or if it's for Rob and Kelly. If we looked at all the items that are in the budget, and we pulled some stuff out, whatever that pain would be, and we use the extra money to do more things, do the do more things end up requiring higher expenses in operations later? Because now we have more assets on the airfield.
Maybe, I mean, you're hypothetically saying if we build more hangars, do we need more staff and more snow removal, and I get that totally.
Right.
My point was only that we don't have the option right now, because we don't have the money.
Right. But I'm wondering, like, if it's short of taking money out of the budget and creating a business that becomes incredibly profitable, I think everything we do ends up leading to, we need more personnel for this, or we need more, the cost of replacing roofs is now much higher because there are more roofs to replace. That I'm not sure that, I mean, if we take a moment in time and we look at the operating revenue of the airfield and we look at the expenses of the airfield, we're upside down right now. And so.
They always have been.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of like thinking, like, I don't know what it looks like to get it to that point where you won't have that delta, and where that delta won't possibly increase as you build more into this. That's my question.
And I'm not suggesting that we do narrow the gap to go build more stuff to incur more expenses. Just saying, let's have an option. Because if we increase the expenses, because we've closed the gap, the tax dollars are pretty flat. It's a two-part thing. We have to bring up the revenue if we're going to increase the expenses. Or if the revenue decreases, because operations are going down or less fuel is being purchased, we need to reduce the expenses. Because if these are all parallel, and the taxed ones are not, they're less, right? They're not growing at the same rate. And if we're constantly going to depend on those tax dollars, we're going to run out if the expenses go up.
So other than the capital projects, which are super flexible in terms of the cost, like the apron that we just did, are there expenses that you see in the budget now that we could cut
No,
to
I
make
think
that?
that was not part of this. I just wanted to see just operations. Because we always have projects, even if
Right.
we don't have to do pavement. Hangar fell down however many years ago, 5, 6, 7, whatever that was. We have to deal with it. Loaders blow up. Things happen. Big winners, small winners. But noteworthy that this was a perfect year for weather. Light winter, gorgeous weather all summer, no smoke, and operations are down. I don't know about year-to-date, but they were in August.
It's within 3% of last year. It's real close, down a little bit.
Yeah, and Jeff has told us, I'm sure accurately, that it follows the economy.
Right. I mean, excuse me, I would always like to know that the budget that's presented to us is realistic and not padded with a bunch of stuff. I recognize that the capital projects are, you know, they're all over the place on this. Ideally, I think what you're saying is absolutely true. I mean, if we could get to the point where the airport was profitable just on the air side, this is a huge win. I don't know that we get there, and I guess to measure my level of support for an initiative toward that would be have a lot to do with what would we be looking at if we didn't have opportunities to increase revenues, like the added MTO class that we just talked about. This is not going to make a huge difference in something like this. If we didn't have additional operations, opportunities to increase revenue, we would have to rely on cost cutting. And to me, it's hard to kind of get behind that philosophically until I saw what the cost cutting might be that would actually make a dent.
And I don't have any idea.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that if expenses do go up and revenue, airside stays relatively flat, and taxes go up slightly, but not at the same rate, Rob presented this to us at some point in the last year, that, you know, and we all went, oh no, that'll never happen. But this shows that it could. Were you timing me, Rick?
No. But I can if you'd like me to. You have unlimited time.
You're the president.
Any other comments?
I mean, I have a couple others, but not related to this. Nothing major. The capital projects, in Kelly's finance report, she's got 2024 budget amount and 2024 progress on a couple things. And I had two questions. One, in the 24 budget, we budgeted $120,000 to replace a Ford F-150 with an electric vehicle. And we spent $141,000 so far this year. And I know we ditched the new truck, but you had the new truck in budgeted at $50,000. So did we buy a really expensive one, or did we replace with two, or what was different?
I believe we got 2 electric trucks for the price that we had budgeted for one. Prices came down significantly this year.
So the budget last year for electric was $120,000.
Right.
And
Which was going right when we built the budget the previous year, right? And the prices dropped significantly on the F-150 Lightnings, and we were able to purchase and swap out 2 trucks, and the board approved the disposal on those 2 trucks earlier this year.
Yeah.
Right.
My question is more, the one that we kicked to the curb in this budget.
For next year?
Was $50,000.
Right,
So they're that much cheaper?
yes.
Yes.
That's great.
Right.
Okay, and the next one is fuel farm skid replace. In 2024, you had 450,000 budgeted, and in 25, it's 750?
It's combining the fuel tank up above there, seeing the 12,000 gallon fuel tank for 300,000.
Yep,
And
got it.
skid for 450.
Okay.
Yeah, the previous budget had 2 line items, we combined those 2. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me.
My question was if you want to pull up the 2-year, just this delta, I mean, and I ran percentages, and they are running 62 to 77% from 2020 to 24 in terms of operating revenue to expenses. But then in budget 2005, there's like the budget 225, this one, it's a delta of 4.7 million, whereas previously everything was like 3 to 3.9. And I'm wondering what that bigger split in the budget 2005 Teresa's telling me it's not the
because-
pavement.
These three are relatively flat, and
You're looking
there's
at-
a $2 million jump.
Yeah.
You're looking at
What-
forecast 2024
24
to
to
budget
25?
2025? Is that?
She's looking at this.
This number.
Right. You're comparing 2025 budget to 2024 forecast. Is that your question?
No, I'm looking at budget 2025, and that delta between
Yeah.
14,479 and 9,792 is 4.7 million. Previous years,
Yeah.
it's always about 3 to 4 million, the delta, and I'm wondering why that is such a bigger spread.
The difference is in 2024, that's a forecast. So remember, it's 8 months of actuals plus 4 months of budget, and we've way overrun the budget for hangar R&M, for example, with all the
So
damage stuff.
I did the math in every year to separate the orange number from the blue number. It was 3.9 million, 3.9 million, 3.2 million, 3.4 million, 2.9 million, and now it's 4.6 million. And I'm wondering why it's so much bigger.
This is the question right here.
So
12.5 to 14 and a half. Like, what pushed it up 2 million?
yeah, so I think as you look across the bottom of the chart, you see actual 2020, actual 2021, actual 2022, actual 2023, a forecast for 24, and then a budget for 2025.
Okay.
So we're comparing the budget number to history of actuals in forecast. And I think those are very different.
That
It's a little bit
12
of apples and
million
oranges.
is, in 2024, that 12 million is likely not where it's going to end up because it's a forecast.
And if we were to compare the budget numbers for each of those previous years, I think you'll find a different split between budget and actual. And so we don't have any actuals for 25 yet.
I'm just, I guess it's 12 million, 12 million, 12 million, it might go to 13, might go to a little more, but all of a sudden now it's 14.5, and that's where I'm,
Let me,
maybe you
let me
phrase it
help a
differently,
little bit.
'cause-
I understand, this is forecast to budget. I get it. And forecast might come in a little bit higher. And just looking at the first page of the draft budget, the airport operating, oh, that's revenue. Okay, so expenses are projected without community benefit to be a little bit more. I have to do the math on it, but 5 million out of that, so that's 14. This one's -2, that's 16. Yeah, I mean, if you take out the community benefit, budget is roughly 14 million in expenses for 24 and 16 for 25. So there is a $2 million growth in that, and I see 664,000 in payroll and 572,000 for operating expenses. So that's 1.2 million. I'm only curious about the other 800,000, but I hear you.
Yeah, but
That's the hangar R&M, is the extra 800,000.
that's the what?
The hangar R&M line
Is the extra 2 mil in 25?
is the delta between 24 forecast and 25.
24 forecast. Well, I switched over to budget because you were talking forecast. So I understand Mary's question. I'm not sure I understand the answer. Are you saying that there's not a $2 million difference between what we're going to end up spending this year and next year's budget?
No, I was just trying to
Expenses?
explain what it is. So the 664 that you said, CPI, merit increase, insurance at 15% may come in lower, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I get-
But there's a placeholder there. We saved 100,000 in cost of goods sold based on our lower raw fuel price that we just agreed on with Fuel. The property insurance is a huge increase. And if you look at the forecast compared to that, this year, the budget, the 4 months worth doesn't reflect any of that. So there's a much, much higher monthly charge for that. County support, the dollars that we pay up, and then admin fee for all the property taxes go up as that revenue dollars go up. And then the difference between the two and the hangar R&M is that same thing. The budget doesn't reflect what we actually are spending this year for hangar R&M.
So I'm seeing insurance is up 300 grand from previous year. So that's part of it. you know, we were trying to figure this out, and we
Going to Lloyd's was expensive.
it's an extra 300 when you look at the line item. So I'm just, this 2 million, it's like, I don't see it, but
When I'm looking at this, this graph here, what jumps out at me as the outlier is the 23 actual expenses. Because if you look at the other years, they're jumping up roughly $1 million every year. So what happened in 23 that the expenses didn't increase? Because I'm really comfortable with how this is going and how I think we're going to land at the end of 24. I think it's going to be linear and, or much more so, and there's going to be less of a delta. It's just what happened in 23, that we didn't spend so much money.
That was the big snow year, and we definitely didn't spend as much in R&M. We didn't get as many projects done as we normally would have due to weather. I can look and see more.
This is also the number I asked for. This isn't the budget. Do you know what I mean? This is operations. This is, yeah. Yeah. No community benefit and that type of thing, which is why it's hard to look at this and connect it. Yeah, so historically, it looks like it has gone up about $1 million a year, which if 23 went up $1 million, then 24 might have gone up $1 million.
but also revenue was down in 23, because it was a big snow, maybe we didn't sell as much fuel.
I mean, the lines are pretty parallel, and you already know how I feel about it. I think I'm way more comfortable with this than I was the first time we talked about it.
And Mary, on your the question on the insurance, so the difference between, I think what you were saying, a $300,000, 314, is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what I saw in,
Again, so the number that's showing for 2024 forecast doesn't have the big dollars in it, right? The 24 budget doesn't have the big dollars for Lloyd's. So it's more than 300,000 increase.
yeah, but the green is the 25 budget,
Correct.
right? And the 24 forecast, 527 to 842, and that's where you have your delta of 314.
Right. It's likely to be more than that, considerably.
The only other thing I want to say is that I'd love to see another $500,000 in community benefit this year, which is part of the reason why I don't want why I want to finance the other thing, because we can't finance that.
Please say that again.
I said the only other thing I'd like to see in this budget that's not here is another $500,000 to the grant program that we've had the last few years, that is eliminated in this budget. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's important to me, and one of the major reasons why I want to finance the apron, to not draw down the cash.
So the Community Foundation Agency Partnership Program was taken out of the budget in the current draft based on board direction in the last workshop.
The majority, and I know I was the minority, but I'm still going to bang on that drum.
Next? Anybody next? Pardon me, now my light's on. Next, comments?
So the only other thing was the fuel farm, and in terms of the budget. And the reason I'm looking at that is I was looking at the time, I was in favor of this pump thing, but I don't see the minute difference being significant. And if we're spending 3.3 million on the apron of our own money, I just was like, and we have no other big projects in the pipeline for a while, I just would feel more comfortable, like I did with paying down the pension, to put this into next year's budget instead of this year's budget. we've done the electrical, but to bring in the skid and the tank, I just don't think that's something we want to need to do this year.
You're saying defer it into '26.
Yes.
So we take it out of next year's budget and put it in the following one.
That's what I would.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just clarifying that I understood it
Right.
since I said I would support you.
Right.
I'll trade it for community benefit of 500,000.
You know, I see we've got 3 tanks, 36,000, we've got 36,000 gallons, so we have like 32,000 capacity. And in here, we're saying the peak day was 3,500 gallons on a day. If we have 10 days of that, yeah, we're squeaking. If we're 8 days, 9 days, you know, and Rob and I talked about this, you know, and it's that component of growth, expansion. It's the component of operations are down. It's the component of, I just don't see the time difference being significant enough. So it's a matter of if we have that extra tank. Rob was saying, you know, what's nice is that if you can bring in a truck and you can purchase more than you can purchase 2 tanks worth, that you might get a better deal. And but to me, it's just, I would like to defer it a year.
Any other comments? Because are we heading towards, other than this item, approval of this budget?
I'd like to keep the fuel tank because we built it in. And it makes me uncomfortable kicking things down the road. I mean, we know we have a commitment as per our strategic plan to look at the GSE, and that's going to be pretty expensive. We've already put that off. We haven't made a decision on lengthening and widening yet. That might be the start of a lot of fees for surveys and engineering and the whole bit. I mean, I feel like the budget as written is what we want to accomplish next year, and we've got the money to do it, so I think we should do it.
And I think we discussed in the last budget meeting that the discussion on lengthening and widening of 220 would be deferred to the new board.
Yeah.
Since I'm in favor of it, but I won't be here. I'd like to make this decision on the fuel tank, and then we can talk about the whole budget. So Mary doesn't want to do it, and I told her I would support her. I'd like the sense of you 3, where we go.
I want $500,000 for community benefit, period, end of story. And if I have to trade the fuel farm for it, fine. And if I don't, that's fine too.
Where do we put $500,000 for,
To the TTCF program.
which we're going to look at in the next board meeting, but it's also eliminated totally from this budget.
Precisely my point.
And you'd want to put it back in?
Yes.
That's an interesting discussion.
Well, it's, I mean, honestly, the only way I can vote for it today.
I understand.
I'm in favor of keeping the fuel farm and eliminating the extremely problematic grants program.
This is expansion. It's more stuff, more, I can support it in the 26, within the context of how we're going to look at that budget in 26. So I made it clear. So am I the only one? Me and Rev right now, I don't know.
What about the?
I think we need to be clear where we're going with that. So I'm not, I think we need to have that discussion in a strategic plan in terms of doing big things plus that, little things, I'm not clear where we are. So, I mean, the idea of taking a year off from that grant program, I'm okay with it.
So if no one else supports me? If no one else supports the community money, then I'm going to vote against the fuel farm. And maybe the whole budget.
Yes, sir.
You looking for something?
This conversation is concerning me. I feel like it's getting oddly political, and I'm not sure that that's it, that this is a. I do feel like we did make a decision about the agency partnership thing.
Meaning I got overruled, but yes, that decision has been made.
Yeah, and it concerns me, like, for multiple reasons. Like Kat said, we know that this has been a problematic thing, and that was one of our decisions about moving forward with the bigger ticket item things. That said, on the fuel tank, and I'm not connecting the two, I was disappointed when I saw the numbers in terms of the cost, or the time savings, because I did expect that it was going to be significantly more, and I did wonder, like, so for the amount of time that was being spent, because our people are not paid by the hour. I mean, they're here anyway, they're going to be doing something, right? And I do feel like when we, and this is where I'm asking you to correct me if I'm misremembering this whole thing, that the benefit of having the extra tank, aside from the capacity issue and the fact that it takes a shorter amount of time to fill the trucks, to fill the aircraft, that the big benefit would be that as we function with providing only sustainable aviation fuel and the supply chain is not plentiful, that as that supply goes up and down, that there could be a time when we don't have fuel here. And that the addition of a new tank would enable us to have a bigger reserve on site for that case. And then we did talk about if that unlikely scenario happened. I think Dave said that it hadn't happened before, or that we didn't expect it. We had two options. One is that we could take Jet A. We could take a tank of Jet A, which is counter to what we wanted to do. But the second thing is just, worst case, we note them that fuel is unavailable for however long it takes, weekend, whatever, to get another tank. So for me, I feel like, and I would like to ask this board, if we think we're going to end up doing this, we should do it now, because nothing ever gets cheaper. If we see it as an infrastructure expansion project that is unnecessary, then I would agree that I would rather not do this. But I feel like, based on the conversation we're having right now, I don't want to defer just because. If we think we're going to end up doing this anyway, we should just do it. We've got the money in the budget right now. I don't want to bargain this with another thing that we've already discussed, and I feel like we kind of put to bed on it. So this is where I fall on this right now. If we're not absolutely certain that we need this, or that we will need this in the future for reasons other than just to have more fuel on site, then I would support pulling it.
So all of that, will you tell me, are you supporting the fuel farm in?
I would like to hear one more time from Rob on.
Thanks, David. There is a staff report. I don't know if folks had a chance to see that. The board certainly has that access. I believe it was one of the board materials that we provided. There are, to me, three primary driving factors on this project. The first is we have a strategic plan objective of maintaining only selling sustainable aviation fuel for the benefit of the greater community here in the North Lake Tahoe Truckee area, which is a 23% carbon reduction per gallon of that fuel. And we're the first to adopt that in the industry. It's a position I think represents the community values, and so we want to maintain that. The supply chain for sustainable aviation fuel is limited. We did recently renegotiate our contract to get a better price for that. It does come out of 2 locations that do vary and are subject to routine supply chain interruptions, coming out of LA and coming out of the Oakland area. We do have, as the staff report notes, we do have 3 large 12,000 gallon tanks that don't fully hold 12,000 gallon due to a number of factors. And so we do often get to the point where we would like to be more secure in our supply, that we don't have supply chain interruptions, because whether supply chain interruption or just regular increased demand here at the airport, I think those are realistic things. 2021, we were selling 700,000 gallons of Jet A fuel here at the airport. We're currently budgeting to sell about 500,000 gallons. So I certainly expect we will return to that level of sales here, which is probably our number 1 revenue source outside of tax revenue, is fuel sales. So protecting and enhancing our number 1 airfield side revenue source by making sure that we have plenty of supply on hand to sell for the traffic that shows up here at their discretion and leisure in private and business aviation, that benefits the airport. The pump upgrades for the fuel farm itself does have translates into a difference of about 2 hours a day during fueling operation days that we have supply showing up and we're filling our own trucks. So it is significant, and we do have hourly employees that are spending time watching trucks being offloaded and onloaded, and it does take a lot of time. So minimizing that time when they're doing that would be a great operational efficiency, which is in line with our strategic plan goals and objective as well. So I think if that helps shape that a little bit, I think this is a project that the fuel farm was built to have the 4th tank. It was not installed for whatever reason in the past. We have capacity to put it there now. This is a project that if we don't do it this next year, it's going to keep coming back every year until we do it, because I think the demand is going to return to the 700,000 gallon level real fast here at the airport.
So 2 things that I'm hearing in there that just to ask you about this. We are seeing a plateau of jet operations right now. And the second question I've got, like if it was being posed to us that we see the trajectory of expectation of fuel sales was going to go from 700 to 900, or that we were going much higher than this, I think that there's an argument that's very sound for this, because then it's what you're saying. It's like then we are actually preserving a revenue source. But if our projection is that we just get back to where we were handling with 3 tanks. So that's what makes me wonder if we need the 4 tank. And then the last question is the pump and the tank, do they have to be the same purchase, or could we derive the benefit from the faster pumping using the 3 tanks we've got now without the addition of a 4th tank?
To answer the last part first, yes, we can install just the upgrade to the pumps that we've already installed electrical for. We spent about half of the design money to design the whole skid replacement. We could upgrade just the pumps and reap the benefit of reduced operational time pumping fuel, essentially. In the bigger scheme of things, I don't know what the future holds for operations here. I can look at the past. If I followed a trend line like Teresa was looking at, and we looked at the previous 2021 trajectory of fuel sales that got up to 700,000, and we continued that without a COVID or post-COVID drop-off or stock market or a number of other things that affect it, wildfire, big winters, I would say that we do have a growth factor that would be significant for fuel sales if we followed that past trend line that was happening from 2018 to 2021 that got us up to 700,000 gallons of Jet A fuel coming more locally than SAF, which is limited production, limited availability, more distant locations.
Right.
So I think we do have a current blip in operations, as Jeff was saying, about 3%. Give or take 3% off. I don't know what the future holds, and it's really, I think in many ways, it's hard to forecast that. Certainly, this will continue to be a resort destination that is very appealing to private business aviation, and will continue to ideally support with fuel sales operations here and reap the benefit of that in the way of net revenue.
You were going to say something.
I know, I was going to say this would be a lot easier if we had a forecast of increased demand that exceeded our capacity. But right now, we're hoping for a return to our previous capacity. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about $3.2 million on the apron, and I'm honestly feeling like before we made decisions about accommodating this massive class of aircraft, I would like to know financially how and whether we're going to be compensated as a district for supporting that class of aircraft. And I know we can't turn anything away, but I just want to make sure that as we look into these investments that are specifically for this, that we are looking into whether or not we're tapping all revenue sources to justify these things.
So what are you recommending, David?
Should we take public comment?
How much would just the pump be without the tanks? Or the pumps be without the tanks? Do we know that?
I don't have that price. The current prices that we have are a combine of the projects. And taking advantage, if we're shutting down the whole fuel system, whole fuel farm to install the pumps, taking advantage of that shutdown to install the additional tank as well, just makes economic sense, timing sense, construction, et cetera.
So you wouldn't recommend us consider pumps alone?
I think segregating it would just create a more expensive interruption a year or two from now when we decide that we need that tank.
Everybody's staring at me. This is just a maybe not so gentle reminder to my board members that we spent 8 or 9 months developing a strategic plan. We spent a lot of time, a lot of resources. Rob was very clear with us from the beginning that it was a 3-year plan, and it guided the decisions that all of the directors and the staff made on a day-to-day basis. And it makes me really uncomfortable when we're veering off and we're questioning stuff that we really did approve 14 months ago. And I'm not saying we should rubber stamp everything, but I also see, if we're talking about operational efficiencies, and Kelly puts a huge amount of time into putting a budget together, and then we're yanking stuff out and moving stuff around, and that's not efficient. That's going backwards. And I just don't want to see us tripping up the staff by questioning all of these decisions that were already made later on for whatever personal reasons.
I have
Go on.
a question for you. I understand what you just said. Do you have a motion? Maybe we can make a decision.
You also have to.
Just had to say something.
My comment to that is, I don't think these are personal reasons, and something that we do with a strategic plan 14 months ago or whenever, it's a high level. And when the budget came, that was the first shot to look at it. And as you cogitate on it, things come to mind. And I think that's our job, is looking at it and thinking, what are the priorities? And I think it's completely fair for us as a board to wear that hat and look at those numbers. And if we change our minds, that is legitimate within a board's prerogative and mission.
Yeah, I agree that it's a living document and there are changes. I just feel like with this particular budget, there's been a lot of things taken out that were agreed upon a while ago. And it doesn't feel like progress to me. It feels like we're trying to stagnate somehow. And I brought this up last time. I think there's a big there's a different, all of us define expansion differently, improvement differently. I think that we all have our own personal vision of that. I don't see the fuel farm as being an expansion as much as an improvement. And so maybe that's, when we go back to the drawing board for another strategic plan, maybe that's something we need to kind of get out on the table and figure out.
Yes.
To your point, I think we need to do all of these things. I just don't think we need to pay for them or execute them this year because of how tight the budget is and because we kicked the community foundation to the curb, which we wouldn't have to do and we didn't agree upon in the strategic plan. That was never something we agreed on. If we finance the fuel farm, or I'm sorry, the apron, then we should do it all this year. That's how I feel about it. It's a cash issue. It all still needs to be done. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't. I don't have the same argument that David has. I totally agree with Rob. We just, in my opinion, don't have the money this year unless we finance the apron and go back to community benefit. I mean, I agree with what Mary said. It's not personal. It's just financial.
I'd like somebody to make a motion, and we can vote on it.
President Stevens, we do need public comment at some point whenever you're ready.
Oh, public comment. Any comments from the public? On the budget? Well, that's what we're talking about. I see nobody getting up.
You blame them?
I'd make a motion to approve the budget without the fuel farm skid replacement and additional tank. Where's the rest of that budget motion?
Is that good enough?
I don't know. They'll tell me. Let's see.
I understand your motion.
Let's see. Where is it?
That's clear for staff.
That's good enough?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we have a
Barry
sample
has
motion
made
there.
a motion. Is there a second? I haven't heard a second. Does somebody else have a motion that might get a second?
It's so tough for me to support the fuel farm when we don't have data that suggests an increase of demand. That, I'm finding it really hard. Like when we talk about the apron, we see an increase in demand, we see an urgency right now. And I don't feel this for the,
So why didn't you second her motion?
because I was not entirely sure what I was thinking until this moment.
Okay,
Can I
Mary's,
second her motion?
Yes.
I second her motion.
we have a motion and a second. Any comments? Any public comment? Let's have a roll call vote.
Director Diamond,
Yes.
Director Heatherington,
Yes.
Director Odette,
No.
Director Rolfe.
I'm not going to blow up the budget over one line item, so I will vote yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We have a budget.
Thank you very much.
Change. Well, there's a lot more to do after we get the numbers on A2, et cetera. All right, I'm looking for my, okay, the next item,
Before we go on, Kelly and Rob, thank you. That was,
Yeah, I
we
second
know that
that.
was a truckload of work.
Put you through the ringer.
yeah, the
Thanks,
question
guys.
is, will they thank us?
No.
You're very welcome.
Bye, break for
Board committee assignments and ad hoc committee reports.
Bio break.
Bio break.
Sorry, Vince.
I didn't use the,
Ow.
this thing. Okay, item number 9, board committee assignments and ad hoc committee reports.
River revitalization. There were 3 meetings last week, lots of progress on the Economic Vitality Action Team, which I'm on that committee. Myself and Joan Jones made a presentation to the town council about putting out an RFI to the land and business owners on the corridor. So instead of it being a top-down, changing, planning, zoning, et cetera, is reaching out to the owners, business owners, landowners to have skin in the game with their entrepreneurial inputs. So to see what it is that they would like to do in terms of revitalization and what their interest is. So the proposal right now, it's still not determined what will be in the RFI, but broadly speaking, it'll go out to everyone. What is your interest in revitalization? And I would anticipate one land business owner potentially being selected for as a relocation, one probably for housing, and one for some type of river access, still to be determined. That'll go to the RSC, the steering committee, and town council. But lots of enthusiasm across the board. And from talking the economic vitality team, we've reached out to about 70% of the landowners. I think there will be 10-ish to a dozen people that will be interested in doing something. So lots of really good progress.
So do we not have a number 1 or 1 here? Lauren, did you ever skip over the first one? Yeah, I did. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm very sequential in my approach here. Climate Transformation Alliance, we did our quarterly meeting this past week. The meeting materials are linked in this document up here. One of the things we're working towards next year is forming a number of subcommittees with the Climate Transformation Alliance group. And so on the meeting materials, you'll see an invitation for those that are interested in finance committee, membership, communications as principal subcommittees to get involved and begin planning our next 2025 year schedule for the CTA. And the scheduled dates for our quarterly meetings that are open to the public are there. We are looking at holding the meetings in different locations next year, some over at the lake, some here at the airport, and we'll begin mixing that up this next year. And that is it.
Act attendees by directors on the 4th.
For November. Yes, thank you. If there are anybody, we're going to plan on making that a combined fly safe program event with Jeff and Kay and team and DVQ. So we're just looking for which directors want to attend the ACT meeting for November.
It's going to be, no, I'm confused by what you say, Fly Safe program event. What, we're going to talk about the Fly Safe program, or it's an event for Fly Safe?
It's an event for Fly Safe
Oh, it
and
is.
talking about the program.
Oh. I'll be there if nobody.
Get your points.
Great.
Okay.
Any others?
I'll be there anyway, so.
So shall we move on to the GM report?
Absolutely. I think the only highlight I wanted to point out here is that we are working with CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE has designed a prescribed burn on Wattle Ranch over about 75 to 80 acres. This has been in their burn plan this year. They have a loose date they're looking towards based on environmental conditions of around November 4th. It is circled in red there in the Wattle Ranch area. They'll do it, they'll break up that 75 acres into about 6 subunits that they'll do one at a time to low-intensity prescribed burn. As part of their normal larger burn plan for this region, CAL FIRE leading this effort and working with the local fire districts as well, as much as they have a capacity to help support that, to achieve their training requirements and also to address the long-term management of this property for wildfire. And we'll be giving notice, CAL FIRE will be the lead on noticing the community of the planned prescribed burn, the smoke that'll come out of that, and we'll have signage on the road and in that area on the trails as appropriate. And we'll use our communication channels to share that information with our airport community. And that's it for my report, unless there's other questions on there.
No questions. I just want to say that, you know, the 1,500 homes that were planned to be there would have been a problem with overflights. And that we have managed this land so conscientiously every year. That's just a great benefit to this community, to all the homes in Glenshire, North Star, Juniper Hills. And I just want to give kudos to staff, to CAL FIRE, to us for continuing to support this.
And the airport for buying it a long time ago.
Well, along with
Which we
money
couldn't
from-
afford to do today, I'm just saying, because
We put $3 million into the purchase.
So this is a great partnership with CAL FIRE as well. This is an example of working with our other agencies in this area. They're doing it as part of their plan, their expense, their training, and we are benefiting from that, not having to spend airport dollars or community benefit dollars on maintaining this land. We also looks like we're going to get about a $1.4 million CAL FIRE grant to do other parts of this property this next year as well, and so we're working on plans for that.
So I had one update and some good news. So the Fair Political Practices Commission will be considering a regulation at its November meeting to expand the public generally exception to create a special rule that would apply to situations involving an airport or harbor where the decision would affect anyone in the same way as it relates to a permit, entitlement, or use. So for us, it'd be hangar tenants. So just a little bit of backstory on this. Under the Fair Political Practices Commission regulations for interpreting the Political Reform Act, generally directors are unable to participate in situations where you have an economic interest that's recognized under the law. But there is an exception that applies. It's called the public generally exception. And despite the name, regulations don't require that it affects everyone in the district the same. Rather, the FPPC normally applies a 25% threshold. So if a decision affects 25% of the businesses, property owners, or people in the district in the same way it affects the director who's at issue, that director can participate recognizing that they don't have a uniquely affected interest. This public generally exception has traditionally not applied in decisions involving hangar tenants, as an example, recognizing that they don't hit that 25% threshold. So what this regulation would do would create a special rule for airports and harbors, which would allow our hangar tenants, if they were directors, to participate on decisions as long as that decision didn't uniquely affect their lease. This would be a change and would allow directors to participate in those situations. As mentioned, FPPC is considering it at its meeting next month, and so maybe as soon as our December meeting, we will have this new rule in place. More information to come.
Thank you, John.
Thanks to Rob for initially alerting me to this proposal.
Aviation and Community Services report.
We're looking at, in terms of hangars, most of the repairs are done. We are still doing some activities, and tenants are going back to their original hangars, going back home. We're also working with a vendor to create an online reservation system for overnight hangars. So we will have one overnight hangar as we go into the winter and next summer. And we're also experimenting with the Airbnb idea that we've been talking about for a long time. And so we have one tenant volunteer that's going to be gone for a large hunk of the winter. So we're going to see if we can get this off the ground. It'd be a reservation system. You could book it online just like you book a hotel room, credit card. There'll be some algorithms in there to reduce some of the staffing time for what works, what doesn't work. We're going to start real small to see if we can get a better utilization of our existing infrastructure. Had a good meeting with the Truckee, Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, the assistant superintendent, and actually Sarah Kramen over here, one of our local pilots, helped facilitate this meeting, as well as one of the high school principals about talking about doing some events with the high school, whether it's an aviation elective class in future years or some type of shadow programs that we could do during some of the breaks. So the beginning of some conversations that I think will be really fruitful. They're super excited. And Sarah, as you're here, thank you for setting that up. If you didn't know, she's was a high school teacher and has made a career change into aviation. So thank you very much. As discussed, operations for September, they were up. Overall for the year, they're slightly down. For our last Fly Safe, while Sarah is here, we had Sarah and Raj, who we helped sponsor them for the Air Race Classic, which is an air race that was started with Amelia Earhart. They came in number 2 out of 48 teams, and so they gave a fantastic presentation. We had 45 people here for the Fly Safe event. We also had a number of female pilots come out, which was super cool, to include the 99s, which is a female flying organization, both out of Reno and here. And to date, we've had 397 pilots attend our Fly Safe seminars and events. Nothing significant in terms of fly quiet, other than lots of helicopters that everyone heard based on the fires that we've had this year. Lucky, no smoke, or very little smoke here in Truckee. I think those are the big items.
What does ME1 stand for?
Martis Valley Estate. So we had 26 households.
It's under the second line under.
Yep, ME1 is a moniker for household. So when we had 74 total comments. That single household had 31 comments. I think if we looked last month, that same household, we're not using their name, but out of Martis Valley Estates, had somewhere approximately the same. So it's just a way I'm trying to give a little bit more data that ME1 is creating about half of all of our comments, just for context. That's what it means. And we had 3 new households report that have never called us before. There's also a quarterly ops comments. That's tab 11 Bravo, if you can bring that up, Lauren. And again, I'm just reporting the facts. And so comments, if you go to the page 2, kind of hard to see, but in the summer, so that is this past summer, last summer, summer before. So quarter on quarter comments are down over the past 3 years. Truth in advertising, here's total number of operations over the past number of years, and it also correlates to number of comments. So more operations, more comments, but in general, our comments are down summer over summer. And there's also, if you go to tab 11C, is a runway utilization report. I don't have any other comments. Are there any questions?
I'm really looking forward to the January ACT meeting, where we're going to reach out to people who have called
Absolutely.
in the past, and DBQ's list of making calls, and, comments are down, and I'll
Just
say
the
it
facts.
again.
Just
People
report the numbers.
Just don't call. I know you're just reporting the numbers, so, but I have to just make that comment, that just because comments are down, it doesn't mean that people are not annoyed. They've just given up. In terms of, are we on to runway utilization then?
Yep.
Okay.
And what I did ask, and David makes the report, and we've been using the 2016 years, the baseline for the past 8 years, so we always compare summer on summer. 2016 being the last full summer with no tower, and we've always compared our summers back to that 2016 year. Being that has now been 8 years, what I asked David is to use the last summer to see how we're doing summer over summer improvement as opposed to that one baseline year of 2016. We did not use 2023 as a comparison because in 2023, runway 0220 was under reconstruction. So this runway utilization report was comparing 2022 summer to this summer so we could get a closer apples to apples. If anyone would like, I do have the report because I asked David to redo it and he did it very quickly. So I also do have the number and the data for 2016 so I can email it to all the board members as well. So you can compare 16 to 24 and 22 to 24.
So my comments to this were seeing the difference in the trend line, just like what you put together for budget, and seeing numbers as compared to percentages, because, if it's a small number, you can get a huge percentage difference that doesn't mean anything. So in like a half hour, 40 minutes, I entered the data for 15, 16, 18, 19, and 21, because I had that readily available. And I would really like to see some sort of trending to see are more aircraft using 220, because it's been kind of this idea. But if we don't know if they are using it, if they're not using it, but all that data is in vector, and DBQ has access to it. And if I can do this in 20, 30 minutes, I would really see some value in deriving it for pistons, jets. You can break it out by each type of aircraft and be looking at a bar chart, and it would inform us. It's real information rather than just, because this doesn't mean anything to me because of the percentages difference and looking at numbers.
It seems pretty clear to me. I mean, say jets, for example, in 24, 89% of them use 29 to arrive and 97 use 29 to depart. Isn't that what this says? Am I reading it wrong?
That's correct.
So I'm not sure what a trend line or bar chart would change.
I'd like to see it over time. I'd like to see what's happened since 16, because when the tower went in, the idea was that part of the tower is they encourage people to use 220. Well, are they using it? Just comparing 22 to 24 doesn't tell me anything.
But the tower can't control what the pilot chooses.
It doesn't control, but we've been doing a lot of outreach and education and saying when the winds are correct, when the winds are viable, please use 220. And there's value in that, knowing are we being effective? Because there's this idea that, if we widen and extend it more people will want to use it. That's been under discussion since '05. I can tell you, we've talked about that. But we don't have any numbers to say, yes, in fact, they will use it or don't use it. There was surveys done. But we can look at this and say, over time, are we seeing more aircraft using it? And if we're not, that says one piece of information to us. But if they are, then that also is of value to know, do we spend that money or not?
Don't we, correct me
Spend the
if I'm
money on
wrong,
what?
don't we see that in the annual report of ops year
We do,
over year?
and there's also, I think it's very important to understand the safety aspect. So in 2016, when we had glider operations, At an uncontrolled airfield, if I'm a pilot and I want to take off on 0220 and there's gliders in the northeast quadrant, I could do that. I could assume that risk. By having a control tower, when we have soaring operation in the northeast quadrant, so you don't have opposite direction traffic, there's an element of safety that our air traffic control tower provides over this space that puts some additional traffic on 1129, not because we're trying to create more noise, but because we don't want opposite direction operations when we have soaring operations going on. So if there's one glider in the northeast quadrant, or there's 12 gliders in the northeast quadrant, it kind of consumes the northeast quadrant plus the short runway. So when we compare 2016, a pre-control tower airfield with soaring and a post-control tower field with soaring, it's not the best comparison, because pre-tower, when any of us could go fly whenever we wanted to, include maybe going beak to beak, head to head with a glider, we could do that. So there's an element of safety that is not shown when we talk about the year 2016 to 2024. That's why I think it's just really important that we keep that in mind.
So is what you're saying, since we have the tower and we have gliding operations, does that mean that in the summer we are less likely to use 220? And so if we were to widen and lengthen it, what benefit do we derive if soaring operations are happening? That to me seems like they control the airspace. Why would we ever want to do that? That is a showstopper to some extent if we're allowing that to control our airspace.
Can I just clarify with Jeff, based on what you just said? Because we've had the control tower here for a number of years.
8 years.
We will see trend by now in just the post-controlled, like the ones before that.
Yes.
We could consider anomalous, but we'll see it.
We'll pull the numbers. It's not hard. I think the numbers are going to be very, very close. They're probably going to be within single digits, and there's lots of factors that go into it.
Single digits in terms of more aircraft
changes.
using. So there's not much change happening. is
Year
what I'm hearing.
in, year out, there's not a lot of change.
Okay, and so that's an interesting point. And number two is, if gliders are happening, the tower is less likely to request people to use 220.
They will request it to the maximum extent possible based on the rules and protocols that the Federal Aviation has for actively controlling an aerodrome from an air traffic control tower. They're going to follow the rules.
Right.
And to the maximum extent possible, when the rules allow, they do ask and encourage pilots, like, hey, call 1102 available. They
And in
do.
the-
And it's also the pilot in commands.
Right.
And there's great debate amongst pilots. Do I take off on the long runway, if I'm a small airplane pilot, if I'm a pilot, one of the greatest risks is losing your engine after takeoff. And so if I take the longer runway and I lose my engine soon enough, I can put it back on the ground. If I lose my engine over the departure end, by the bike park, it's really bad over there.
Yeah,
so
it
is it
is.
better to lose my engine where I can put it back on the ground, or is it better to take off runway 02? If I lose my engine right after I take off, I'm going to go off the end of the cliff. If I lose my engine as I'm departing over the cliff, I have more options with flat dirt. So, it's not a hard and fast, same time, every time.
So given what David just said in terms of a trend line of seeing usage since 17, is that something that's feasible to see?
Yes.
Because I'd like to see it, because that's going to weigh into my decisions, what efforts we put into that.
But do you want, it's like, these are monthly reports, so this is like comparing one period to another period.
This is summer over summer.
Yeah,
on this
so
one.
that's what I'm saying. So it's one period over another period, but But trend line wise, wouldn't we want to see annual, based that on annual, like the annual report that we get once a year on this, as opposed to the monthly ones?
The thing is that probably half to 60% of our operations occur in this period from June 15th to September 15th. More than half. You know, it's what happens in March. It's, you know, I was up in the tower, and I think I was there for an hour or two, and I saw 5 planes. You know, so it's one of those things of, this is our heavy period. I would say it's more like 75% of our aircraft, our operations occur in this 6 months, not half, but 75, 80%. You know, and that was the idea when we put the tower in on a temporary basis to see if it made a difference in summer, and or it was the 2 weeks at Christmas. But to me, to see these as actual numbers would mean more to me, and to see a trend over time, because if we're not seeing a difference on runway utilization, I don't know that it'll make a difference going forward. You know, it's education, but it's still, if they're not using it, and if they're soaring operations in this same period, they're not going to go on it. Which is a big deal.
So your question is,
I wanna
you want
see this.
numbers and a graph and a trend line,
Right,
and we'll debate 220
at a
next
future
year.
time, at another time. But it's something to be aware of, to think about. But I would like to see this, and if it's not excessive. Thank you.
I hate to ask a question about this, but can I ask a question? Because I feel like if I were staff right now, I'm not entirely sure what I just heard. On these reports, there's 2 periods that are compared. So there's 22 and then compared to 24.
Correct.
That wouldn't make for a very interesting trend line.
No,
So are you asking in these, the period reports that we see, to see more years?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that, I didn't get that. I thought you just wanted to see a line between these two.
no. I mean, if I looked at, I had 5
Could I
years
ask,
of
what would
data.
the
I had-
data, I'm sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
I had 15, 16, 18, 19, and 21 in my files. So I pulled them up.
Okay.
And I ran these bar charts and trends. It took me about a half hour. And I'm not the Excel queen like some people. I'm a princess. So I'm just saying that this is all, Vector has all this information. Vector could probably do it in, you know, even less time. To see this over time, to see actual numbers instead of percentage change.
And you should really be looking at numbers while glider operations are happening.
That's true.
Because it doesn't really matter when there are no gliders.
That's true, too.
You could get more on the crosswind runway, but not when gliders are there.
Which are there from middle
And-
June till middle September, you know?
Or
sometimes.
sooner than middle of June, but still,
Yeah.
it's summer.
Yeah.
And it,
And in that era, when there was not a tower, the idea was that they were speaking to each other via, you know, where are the gliders? Where are, you know, who's doing what? This was even pre-transponder days. So,
and just to be clear, it's not a binary. If there is a glider there, there's a lot of factors that go into the protocols. So if you're the air traffic controller and you know that there's a glider in the northeast quadrant, you can physically see them, and I can depart David off the runway. I can do that. If there's one glider in the northeast quadrant and I physically don't see them, I cannot clear an aircraft off 0220. So it's not a pure binary.
right.
But for a large period of the day, it makes the crosswind runway unusable when there's glider operations because of the opposite direction ODOs.
That's right. So that's what I would like to see, is a trend line of aircraft usage, the different aircraft usage on 220 from You're saying in 16 it was pre-tower, 17 had tower. To look at those 7 years. If I'm,
What, could I ask to help not to be obstinate, to block the question, but to understand what decision you would try to be deriving from that to help craft the data to help you?
what can we do with that? I think there's going to be a lot of discussion next year in terms of what are we doing with 220 or not doing 220. And this is data that is of value in assessing that decision.
Okay.
If we're not using 220, why should we widen and lengthen it?
Right.
I believe that is what her point is, and I'm a big proponent of widening and lengthening it, and I've just had my thinking questioned by gliders on that area, and I want gliders on that area. We want to sign a long-term glider lease. I would suggest that. So there you are.
We'll put something together.
Let's move on to the next agenda item, if that's all right. Any public comment on this? No public comment. How about the Finance and Administration report?
Good evening again. You received the quarterly financials through September 30th, 24. We are looking at revenues of 17 million. We're up 2.4 million over budget. Expenses of 13 million, up 215,000 over budget for net income of 1.825. A quick update on our quarterly investments. Wells Fargo, where we have our CDs, the average rate of return is 5.17%. LAIF is up to 4.71, so they're coming back up as well. CalClass is 5.26. And on the end of the document, there's the quarterly variances. So most of the items in green are things that are under budget by over $10,000. And the majority of those items are really just the timing of when the invoices came in and what month the budget was. So, for example, one of the biggest ones there is community and agency partnerships because we haven't awarded those yet. So that will catch up next month. And in the pink section is the items that are over, and the big ones there are hangar repairs, our insurance that we've already talked about, and lands management, where we did a few projects that we do once every 20 years. And we won't see those again for a while. Can I answer any questions you might have?
Questions for Kelly from the board? Good. Questions from the audience? Any comments? Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Future agenda priorities and meeting minutes. Meeting management.
I'm going to review from today's meeting, or is it the next agenda item?
I didn't hear what you just said.
I said, do you want me to review from today's meeting, or do you want me to talk about, or is that the next agenda item?
Well, I'm just reading what's on the agenda. Generally, upcoming meetings and rolling agenda. Why don't you talk about what you want to talk about?
I was just going to review the highlights from today to make sure I had the right action items to take away, although I know this is recorded and Lauren has good notes. We do have a unfunded pension liability payment approval of $500,000. We have approval to include Alpha 2 apron in our budget for 2025, but also looking at finance options for that project for the airport district's share in the cost of that to consider when we go through the bid options later next year. And the budget was approved with the exception of removing the fuel farm project from the 2025 budget that's currently in there for $750,000. And we're looking at future historical trend lines on operations on our runways as we begin to talk about future 220 widening and extending this next year, and looking at those trend lines over time, pre-tower to today. Did I miss anything?
Okay. Review of the rolling agenda. This what's here?
We do have the rolling agenda included, and it's on the screen as well. So we have a number of items next month, including the Community Foundation's agency partnerships, recommended prioritization through their process. We'll be presenting that next month, when we have various other topics on here as well. No additional topics at this point.
Okay. Staff and board member conference attendance reports.
I just returned from the Mountain Towns 2030 Summit, Climate Summit in Jackson, Wyoming, where I was asked to present and did present on the Climate Transformation Alliance, Sustainable Aviation Fuel here at the airport. And it was a good presentation. My fellow panel member was the Jackson Hole Airport general manager, and he presented on climate-related projects they're working on at Jackson Hole. It was a good crowd, a lot of great questions, and a lot of good follow-up after the conference about how we were able to get to the point where we're only selling sustainable aviation fuel. Really well received from the audience across 500 plus attendees across mountain town communities in the West mostly.
I think we actually did meeting review and direction to staff, did we not?
Yep.
Okay. Board member announcements.
Can I ask him a question?
Pardon me, yes.
Did you see, are any other airfields doing anything in that regard that we have not done that we might think about? Or are we?
No, I didn't see any particular projects that were being undertaken at that conference, or the ones that we aren't undertaking, from electrification here on the airfield to sustainable aviation fuel. We have a N-Zero contracted to monitor our greenhouse gas emissions and do annual reporting now. I think we're moving in some really great directions on those fronts. The one thing that we don't have that many other airports have is we actually haven't set goals yet for our greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so that's something that certainly we bring to the board as we revisit our strategic plan goals this next year with the new board, and identifying, do we want to set targets of what we want to begin to try to achieve going forward for our reductions, and particularly our scope 3 emissions, which is our used fuel here, which is our, if you looked at a pie chart, it's like 97% of the emissions of the airport is fuel. And thus why one of our positions is only selling sustainable aviation fuel is pretty significant for the industry and for the airport and the community here.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a board meeting on December the 4th, lots of stuff on it.
I have a board member announcement.
Well, why don't you announce away then?
I was on the FAA website, and it was just yesterday that the FAA is ready for powered lift, be the first completely new category of civil aircraft since helicopters were introduced in the 1940s. Powered lift operations include air taxis, cargo delivery, and a variety of operations within urban and rural areas. They're drones with lifts, and then they turn. And this is just adopted yesterday by the FAA. And so kind of this, what is it? Takeoff and land, it's vertical takeoff and landing, basically. And so just to know, it was just yesterday they approved it. Which, kind of looking ahead, what does that mean for us? I don't know, but to be aware that could be some changes.
Where you don't need runway. Okay. December the 4th is the next meeting. Lots of stuff on that agenda. And hopefully the results of the election will be in. It should be that by then, even the counties who ought to be able to report by then. I don't know about anybody else, but certainly the airport board will be defined by then. And the important announcement, it'll be my last board meeting. And with that, I move we adjourn.
Sec-
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.